Marvelous hello, friends and loved ones. How are you today? And welcome to a very, very special episode. You see, 10 years ago today, Persona 4 was released in the States, and I've decided that I need to celebrate this special occasion. Did you just talk? That's what I thought. So, I've decided I'm going to finally take a look at the original Persona game. Heck, the very first Megami Tensei RPG ever localized. That's right, folks, I am finally looking at Revelations Persona. Revelations Persona was released in 1996, and aside from Jack Bros on the Virtual Boy, was Atlus USA's first attempt at localizing a Megami Tensei title. Naturally, there were some hiccups. For starters, the Revelations title. While it's clear it was created to be an all-encompassing label for any localized title in the franchise, the only other game to use it was the Demon Slayer for the Game Boy a few years later, and even by Persona 2, they'd scrapped the idea entirely. Also, with this game coming out in the mid-90s, we were still in that awkward period when Western publishers assumed Western audiences wouldn't care about or even understand Japanese characters in a Japanese environment. So they really painted this thing red, white, and blue with a paintbrush made out of bald eagle feathers. Nearly every character had their Japanese name changed to a more American-sounding one, and some even got redesigned. Just to name a couple, Hidehiko became Brad, Eriko and Nanjo became Ellen and Nate and were given paler skin and blonde hair, Yukino got changed the least to just Yuki, probably because they knew we shouldn't get too attached to her, and Masao Mark Inaba stayed Mark, but not cool, Atlus. You can't just go around changing people's hats like that. The game opens up with a group of friends hanging out after school and arguing about whether or not they should try out this Persona game, an urban legend ghost story said to let them see some weird stuff. The game naturally works and many of the characters get knocked out, allowing their minds to enter the realm of Philemon. And I know I shouldn't be making fun of these cutscenes because it's a 1996 PS1 game and all, but oh my god, just look at this guy. Oh, I love it. The idea is that if you can hold on to your own identity in this realm, Philemon will grant you the power of Persona, which is one part the Guardian system from Shin Megami Tensei If, with just a dash of ripping off JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. For this playthrough, I named the protagonist Edward. See, since he doesn't have a canonical name, the widely accepted name for the original protagonist is Naoya Todo from the manga series, and the creator of the manga, Shinshu Ueda, decided to create her own backstory for the Revelations version of the protagonist, dubbing him Edward Tanaka, a Japanese transfer student who is a silent protagonist due to his English not being very strong. Waking up in the nurse's office, Edward, Mark, Yuki, and Nate are sent to the hospital to check if they're okay, and good lord, this world map is terrible. I didn't know where else to bring it up in the video, but it needed to be said. While visiting their sick friend Mary, a mysterious earthquake changes the fabric of reality, sealing their town in the dome, unleashing demons, and turning simple everyday buildings into long, winding video game-esque dungeons for some reason. And that reason is probably that this is a video game. It's also fortunate that they awaken to their new superpower, Persona. Also, I want to quickly mention it's not just the characters that got Americanized names, as the majority of the Personas and demons did as well. So no, Edward's initial persona isn't Seimon Kongo, it's Starion. Which I just realized while writing the script is probably a literal JoJo's reference. I should really watch that show at some point. The gang eventually learns that all of these events were caused by a man named Guido Sardinia, the head of the Saeki Electronics and Biological and Energy Corporation, otherwise known as SEBIC. All jokes about the localization aside, Guido Sardinia is a legitimately awesome villain name. After heading back to school, Edward and Nate encounter Mary, who seems to be acting pretty weird. She doesn't even seem to remember being in the hospital. Strange.
Clone, robot, or long-lost twin? Take it all bets!
But hey, she's got a persona, and I need all the help I can get. So despite Persona 1 actually having 9 playable characters, you only get to use 5 on any one playthrough. Edward, Mary, Mark, and Nate will always be in your team, and you have to choose between Brad, Ellen, Alana, or Chris for your 5th member. This means to get the character you want, you have to turn others down when they ask to join you, or else you're gonna get stuck with someone you don't want. Lastly, there's Yuki, but aside from that first dungeon, she's only in your party during the Snow Queen quest, an entire alternate story path that was sadly cut from this version of the game. I'd honestly love to cover that one day, so let me know if you want that video in the comments below. For this playthrough though, I chose to get the secret character, Chris. He's a little tricky to get, so allow me to go through the process for you. At the very start of the game, like literally as soon as you're able to move around, go to the teacher's lounge and talk to this dude. Then go upstairs to this classroom to meet Chris. Easy, right? Then go to a different classroom and talk to this guy. Then navigate the world map to get to the mall, go to the convenience store, and talk to this NPC lady, who is actually Chris's mom, and tell her you'll agree to be Chris's friend. Okay, so far so good. But wait, only talk to her once, because for some reason, if you talk to her twice, you've ruined everything.
Don't forget it!
Then, go to the casino and talk to Mark's friends, who will tell you they saw someone at the abandoned factory, so head there to see Chris again. And this is where he joins you? No, he leaves. Now, continue the game like normal. Remember, this was all as soon as you get control to move around. Once you get out of the hospital, head towards the Sebek building to see one final scene with Chris. If you've done all of this absolutely perfectly, now you just have to tell Brad, Ellen, and Alana to piss off when they try to join you. You'll know you've done it all correctly if Alana says that she hopes you die before running off. How was anybody supposed to know how to do this? What, did you just have to look it up on that sleek, fast 1996 internet? Despite all of this, it's a really good idea to go with Chris, with the only downside being you have to make it through the next dungeon without a full party. But we eventually track down Guido Sardinia, and through a problem with his giant evil MacGuffin machine, we all get sent to another world that's kind of like ours, but not really. We quickly find out that this world is where the Mary from our party is from, leading the gang to wonder where the real Mary is. There are also these 2 little girls that look like Mary, with this one wearing black being a meanie who is on Guido's side and she makes fun of Mary's boobs. In order to stop Guido's plans, the gang is going to need some extra help. Luckily, they've got Chris, who is more than willing to help us out so long as we don't stop him from his one goal of killing Guido Sardinia. You know, in later Persona games, the idea of anyone in your group actually killing somebody is treated as this huge ethical dilemma, and it's a line they never want to cross. In this game, it's the driving force of one of your party members, and literally nobody seems to think it's a bad idea. So yeah, Persona 1. All aboard the murder train! Choo choo! Another way Persona 1 differs from the newer titles is that every character can wield multiple personas. Each character has certain arcana that they specialize in, and quite a few personas can only be used by Chris. But there are 100 personas in this game that you can fuse at the Velvet Room by using spell cards you get by negotiating with demons. Each persona has a unique sprite with multiple animations, and they're probably the most visually stunning part of this entire game. Unfortunately, they're all pretty much useless. In fact, aside from initial and ultimate personas, I basically only fused 4 new ones my entire playthrough. Get Remy on Edward, so he's essentially immune to magic. Deva on Mary, so she has a good party heal spell. Vortek on Mark, so he can just nuke most enemies in the game with Megidolon. And Leviathan on Nate for that exact same reason. I was able to use this setup through pretty much the entire game. Eventually you come across the other mini Mary who wears white, and you need her to give you her half of a magic compact so you can get to Guido. Just remember that if you fight a boss during this part, you should probably just load your most recent save because you're officially on track for the game's bad ending. I wanted to tell you all this now because the game isn't going to tell you for another couple of dungeons when it's already happening. When we finally confront Guido, he reveals that we're too late, and he uses the power he's accumulated in this world to make himself a god, and create an enormous castle back in our world. We also learn that the reason why Chris wants to kill him so badly is that Guido and Chris are brothers. Well, half-brothers specifically. Apparently their dumb dead dad liked to stir the pot. Edward and friends eventually make it back to the real world, but Guido Sardinia has already taken over, declaring himself a god and brainwashing all humans into believing they are lowly beings. So we go to take him out, and he kinda lets us? Turns out getting everything you want and being a god is really boring. Even though we defeat Guido, his persona, Massacre, reveals its true nature as the one who was pulling the strings all along, and makes one last-ditch effort to try and kill us.
Oh, by the way, that's Nyarlathotep. He's kind of a big deal in this series.
At the end of the fight, Guido is dead. You can tell because of how happy Chris is. Never mind. Thought I saw a smile. Unfortunately, it turns out that Guido was the one keeping the real Mary alive, as she was hooked up to his machine, and it was her subconscious that created the entire alternate world, and even the Mary that's been in our party this whole time. Our Mary doesn't take this news very well. But now that Guido is dead, there's nothing stopping both worlds from being consumed by Pandora, a terrifying monster created by all of Mary's negative emotions. Philemon allows Edward and Mary into the Sea of Consciousness to try and get the last magical compact from the real Mary's soul. And while we're down there, we also run into basically Shadow Edward, who is just hanging out and playing video games.
Just like you! It's symbolic!
Assuming players made the correct moral choices throughout the game, in other words, assuming you weren't a selfish jerk that leaves people to die, potential party members not included, Shadow Edward will reward players with these special totems needed to fuse everybody's ultimate personas. This is cool in theory, but by this point in the game, your characters are all probably around level 40 to 45, and to make the ultimate personas, you need to be around level 60, and the only remaining dungeon is the final dungeon, which means that we need to do a lot of grinding if we actually want to use them. But we get the final compact from Mary's soul and eventually get everybody's ultimate persona, and these guys are totally worth it, especially if you look up the skill inheritance guide to give them all one extra awesome spell. Mary gets Valzante, who can fully heal the entire party, Mark gets Demo, who can make all the other ultimate personas look better by comparison, Chris gets Mondo, who I just talked about on the Demonic Compendium, so go watch that when you're done with this video, Nate gets Alfred, the literal angelic form of his deceased butler and best friend, in what may be one of the most interesting and awesome persona ideas ever conceived, and I have no idea why he wasn't in my top 10 personas video, and Edward gets Ra, who is cool, but you may notice he's not that persona. You may have noticed a certain other persona on the game's cover, on literally every single loading screen, on the thumbnail for this video. Well, that persona is Ashura, the Orpheus Telos to Makoto's Messiah, if you will. The completion bonus persona, who can only be fused if you get the spell cards of all 142 demons in the game through successful negotiation. And I know what you're thinking, is it worth it?
Ooh, boy.
No! In order to get every skill card, the combined average level of your party needs to be at least 75, with Edward specifically needing to be level 86 to even use him. And if you thought grinding just to get the ultimate personas was time consuming, this is so much worse. Getting all the cards takes forever. Plus, the game doesn't have any sort of a compendium, so you have to physically keep track of which cards you have or haven't obtained yet. When you get the card from the 142nd demon, you'll get the Glass Doll Totem, which is needed to fuse Ashura. An extra level of suckage, though, is that Ashura is both a special fusion persona and a totem fusion persona, so you can't even get good skills onto him through fusion. He has to be made from Cyrus and Valkyrie, so the best you can inherit onto him is Mahama. And that particular combination of demon races will always result in a persona with weakened stats, meaning the so-called ultimate persona will always be nerfed. He has decent spells, but none capable of hitting all enemies, and the SP cost to use him is so insanely high that it's really just best to stick with Ra. And not just because Ra has a skill called Boss Damage, whose only purpose is to deal massive damage to Pandora. Who, by the way, is this gross monster thing with Mary's face that I can truthfully call a butthead. Kill her enough and she turns into a giant butterfly, who is easily taken down thanks to the overpowering nature of Ra's boss damage spell. And because I spent 2 straight days grinding myself up to level 86 in a game where being level 50 is probably overkill. Whatever, Pandora is dead, Mark, Nate, and Chris are sent back home, Mary kisses Edward and confesses her love for him, and wow did that come out of left field. There's a nice little epilogue that involves the real Mary being out of the hospital and having fun with everybody, we get a bit of info about what all the characters went on to do with their lives, and then the credits roll. So now, to answer the question on everybody's mind, is Revelations Persona a good game? Not really. No. It's incredibly slow, especially in the battle animation. Several parts of it are ugly, like that world map. Literally a huge chunk of the game was just removed in the States. The story and characters are pretty solid, but they don't feel as fleshed out as they could have been. And that's not helped with the localization being horrible. And I'm not just talking about the Americanization. That actually made me laugh a few times. Like with the butler being Alfred and this couple being named Bruce and Selena, I know someone on the 1996 localization team was a Batman fan. The game itself is loaded with typos and grammatical errors. Also, most of the voice actors don't know how to pronounce persona. The only reason I think anybody should ever play this is if you're a die-hard Persona fan who has just the right amounts of determination and curiosity to see it all the way through and appreciate just how far the series has come. Or if you bought a PS1 Classic last week, because much to my surprise, this game is on there. Which is great, because that console's base price is less expensive than a complete copy of this game. If you ever do want to play Persona 1, I recommend the enhanced PSP version from 2009, as it fixes nearly every problem I've got with this one. Battle animations can be skipped, the world map is leagues better, you can experience the Snow Queen quest in all its glory, the localization is vastly improved, but you still have to keep track of which spell cards you have or haven't obtained by yourself if you want Vishnu. Yes, I'm still mad. Regardless of how I feel about this particular game, it was absolutely amazing to look back at the very first entry in the series and really just see how far the entire franchise has come since this game. It's really been quite the Persona adventure. You know what? Nobody asked you.